Chapter 1, The Stranger in the Room. The air smelled of antiseptic and artificial lemons, a sharp, stinging scent that felt like it was trying to scrub the inside of Kenneth's skull. His eyelids felt like they were glued shut with sand. When he finally forced them open, the world was a blur of harsh fluorescent whites and rhythmic, metallic chirping. Pulse. 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 Kenneth. The voice was soft, trembling with a jagged edge of relief. Kenneth turned his head slowly. The movement sent a dull throb through his temples. A man was sitting in a plastic chair pulled tight against the bedside. He looked exhausted, with dark circles bruising the skin under his eyes and a chin shadowed by several days of stubble. Kenneth squinted. He knew that face. High cheekbones, a narrow nose, and eyes that always seemed to be studying a difficult equation. Chris. Kenneth's voice was a dry raspy whisper. Christopher, why are you in my dorm? The man's hand, which had been reaching out to touch Kenneth's arm, flinched back. A flicker of something, pain. Panic, crossed his face before it was smoothed over by a watery smile. Dorm? Ken, no. We graduated years ago. Christopher leaned forward, his fingers finally settling on Kenneth's hand. His grip was surprisingly tight. You're in the hospital. There was an accident. You've been asleep for a long time. Asleep? Kenneth tried to reach back into his mind, but it was like reaching into a void. He remembered the smell of old library books. He remembered a midterm exam. He remembered Christopher as the quiet, brooding roommate who lived in the bed across from him, the guy who kept his desk too clean and watched Kenneth from the corner of his eye while they studied. How long? Kenneth managed to ask. 2 years, Christopher whispered. The number hit Kenneth like a physical blow. 2 years of his life, evaporated. He looked down at his own hands, they were thin, the skin pale and translucent. Where's my mom? My sister? Christopher's expression softened into a look of profound pity. Your mom, she couldn't handle the bills, Ken. And the distance. I told them I'd take care of everything. I've been here every day. I haven't left your side. A surge of confusion rose in Kenneth's chest. Christopher was a roommate. A distant acquaintance at best. Why would he be the one staying? That's a lot for a friend to do, Chris. Thank you. Christopher let out a shaky breath, a small, sad laugh escaping his lips. He squeezed Kenneth's hand again, his thumb brushing over Kenneth's knuckles in a way that felt uncomfortably intimate. Friend? Christopher murmured, his eyes locking onto Kenneth's with an intensity that made the monitors beep a little faster. Ken, we're way past that. Don't you remember? We were supposed to move into our new place the week of the crash. Kenneth's heart stuttered. Move in. Like, roommates again? No, Christopher said, his voice dropping to a tender, proprietary silkiness. As a couple. Ken, I'm your boyfriend. We've been together for 3 years. Boyfriend. The word felt wrong in Kenneth's ears, like a note played out of tune. He searched his mind for a kiss, a date, a whispered, I love you, but he found nothing but the image of Christopher sitting at a desk in a cramped dorm room, silent and staring. I don't remember us being like that, Kenneth stammered, his head beginning to throb with a sudden, sharp heat. It's okay, Christopher whispered, leaning in closer until Kenneth could smell the coffee on his breath. The doctors said there would be gaps. It's the trauma, honey. But I have everything. I have photos, letters, our whole life saved. I'll help you find us again. I promise. As Christopher leaned down to press a soft, lingering kiss to Kenneth's forehead, Kenneth closed his eyes. He felt a wave of nausea, not from the medicine, but from a cold, instinctual shiver running down his spine. He was lost in a dark forest, and the only person holding a flashlight was a man he didn't truly know. I'll help you find us, Christopher had said. But as Kenneth lay there, He felt less like he was being found and more like he was being claimed. Chapter 2, Living a Fabricated Life. The transition from the hospital to home was a blur of paperwork and the cold, biting air of a world Kenneth no longer recognized. The apartment was a minimalist sanctuary on the 14th floor, overlooking a city that felt like a neon blueprint. It was beautiful, filled with lush monsteras and mid-century modern furniture, but to Kenneth, it felt like a staged film set. "I tried to keep everything exactly how you liked it," Christopher murmured, guiding Kenneth to a plush velvet sofa. He moved with a hovering grace, his hand constantly hovering near the small of Kenneth's back. "The lavender candles, the silk throws, remember how you insisted on this specific shade of forest green?" Kenneth ran a hand over the fabric. "It was soft, expensive. I guess I have good taste." "The best," Christopher smiled. It was a small, thin smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hungry? I made your favorite. Thai green curry. Extra lime, no cilantro." Kenneth nodded, though his stomach felt like it was tied in knots. He sat in the silence of the apartment, listening to the rhythmic thud-thud of Christopher chopping vegetables in the kitchen. It was too quiet. Every time Kenneth tried to reach for a memory of this place, of laughing in this kitchen or sleeping in the bedroom down the hall, he hit a wall of static. After dinner, Christopher sat beside him on the sofa, pulling out a sleek leather-bound scrapbook. "The doctor said we shouldn't force it, but I thought seeing these might help the static go away." He opened the book. There was Kenneth, laughing at a beach. There was Kenneth at a Christmas party, wearing a ridiculous sweater. And in every photo, there was Christopher. He was always there, his arm draped possessively around Kenneth's shoulders, his face pressed close to Kenneth's cheek. Kenneth stared at a photo of them at a pier. "Why do I look so tired?" he wondered. His eyes in the photos looked glassy, his smile slightly tilted, as if he were trying to remember a joke he'd forgotten halfway through. "I don't remember this trip," Kenneth whispered, his finger tracing the edge of the glossy paper. "You were exhausted from work," Christopher said quickly, his voice dropping into that soothing, melodic register. "I took you away for the weekend to pamper you. You told me that night that you didn't know what you'd do without me." As Christopher spoke, a sudden, violent flash ignited behind Kenneth's eyes. White light. The smell of rain on hot asphalt. A voice, deeper than Christopher's, warmer, laughing as it said, "10 more minutes, Ken, just wait until you see the view." "Ah!" Kenneth gasped, clutching his head as a jagged spike of pain lanced through his temples. "Ken. Kenneth. Look at me," Christopher's voice was suddenly sharp, commanding. He grabbed Kenneth's chin, forcing him to look away from the photos and into his dark, intense eyes. "Don't fight it. If it hurts, it means you're trying too hard. Just listen to my voice. I'm the one who was there. I'm the one who stayed. Everyone else left, Kenneth. I'm all you have." Kenneth's breath hitched. The headache receded into a dull, throbbing ache, leaving him weak and shaking. He looked at Christopher, who was now stroking his hair with terrifying tenderness. "Everyone else left." The words felt like a cage closing. "I'm sorry," Kenneth breathed, leaning his heavy head against Christopher's shoulder. "I'm so sorry I can't remember you." "It's okay, my love," Christopher whispered into his hair, his grip tightening just a fraction too much. "I remember enough for the both of us." Deep down, in a place the trauma couldn't reach, a tiny voice screamed that something was wrong. But as Kenneth looked around the beautiful, silent apartment, he realized he was a ghost in his own life, and Christopher was the only one claiming to see him. Chapter 3, The Screech of Tires. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with the threat of rain, as Christopher's sleek black SUV climbed the winding mountain roads. The cabin of the car was pressurized and silent, save for the low, rhythmic hum of a cello suite playing through the speakers. Christopher sat behind the wheel, his posture perfect, one hand draped casually over the gear shift, occasionally reaching over to pat Kenneth's knee. Almost there, Ken. This resort is private. No phones, no noise. Just us. It's exactly what you need to stop those headaches. Kenneth leaned his forehead against the cold windowpane. The passing trees looked like jagged teeth against the horizon. I feel like I'm always running away from something, Chris. But I don't know what it is. You're just running away from the stress of recovery, Christopher said smoothly. Trust me. I know what's best for you. I know what's best for you. The phrase felt like a heavy blanket, stifling and thick. Kenneth closed his eyes, trying to find a peaceful thought, but all he could see was that static, again, flickers of a life that felt more real than the leather seat beneath him. He thought of a voice calling him Kenny. Christopher never called him Kenny. Christopher only ever used his full name, like a title he had purchased. Suddenly, the world turned upside down. A massive buck leaped from the tree line, its eyes glowing gold in the headlights. Watch out! Kenneth screamed. Christopher slammed his foot onto the brake pedal with violent force. The ABS system kicked in, a staccato thud-thud-thud-thud that vibrated through the frame of the car. The tires shrieked against the asphalt, a high-pitched, metallic wail that ripped through the mountain air. The sound acted like a key turning in a rusted lock. Screech. Thud. Shattering glass. Kenneth's vision didn't just blur, it fractured. He wasn't in an SUV anymore. He was in a smaller, older car. Rain was lashing against the windshield. He was screaming at someone on his Bluetooth speaker, "Carter, he's following me. He won't stop, he's hitting my bumper." Then, a blinding white light from the rearview mirror. A deliberate ram. The sensation of spinning, weightless, into the dark. Kenneth. Breathe. Christopher was shaking him, his face inches away. They had stopped safely. The deer was gone. But Kenneth's lungs had seized. He was clawing at his throat, his chest heaving as he stared at Christopher, not as his savior, but as the monster in his rearview mirror. "You," Kenneth wheezed, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "It's okay, it was just a deer, we're safe," Christopher said, his voice frantic, his hands reaching out to cradle Kenneth's face. But Kenneth couldn't see the loving boyfriend anymore. He saw the way Christopher's eyes didn't show concern, but a terrifying, cold calculation. I can't, breath." Kenneth gasped. The internal pressure became too much. The headaches that had plagued him for weeks culminated in a singular, explosive burst of white-hot agony. His vision went black. As he drifted into unconsciousness, the last thing he felt wasn't the comfort of a partner. It was the crushing realization of a prisoner. He remembered everything. He remembered the obsession. He remembered the way Christopher used to stand outside his dorm for hours. He remembered the love of his life, Carter, and the way Christopher had tried to kill him to steal his place. When Kenneth's head hit the headrest, he wasn't the confused amnesiac anymore. He was a man who finally knew exactly who was sitting in the driver's seat. Chapter 4, The Mask of Innocence. The smell of leather and expensive cologne was the first thing to greet Kenneth as he drifted back to consciousness. He didn't open his eyes. He couldn't. Not yet. Behind his closed lids, the static had been replaced by a high-definition horror film. He remembered the rain. He remembered the way Christopher's car had nudged his bumper, over and over, like a predator playing with its food, until the final, sickening shove that sent Kenneth over the embankment. He remembered the face of the man who had looked down at his wrecked car with a smile before the world went black. Christopher didn't save me, Kenneth thought, his heart cold and heavy as lead. He broke me so he could put the pieces back together his way. He felt a hand brush a stray hair from his forehead. The touch made his skin crawl, a primal, flight or fight, response screaming in his veins. But Kenneth was a survivor. If he showed his cards now, on a deserted mountain road with a man who had already tried to kill him once, he wouldn't make it to the next sunrise. Kenneth let out a soft, fluttering sigh. He fluttered his eyes open, making sure to keep them glazed and unfocused. Ken. Honey. You're back, Christopher whispered. They were parked on the shoulder of the road, the SUV idling with a low, predatory growl. Christopher was leaning over him, his eyes searching Kenneth's face for any sign of the truth. Kenneth blinked slowly, forcing a weak, confused smile. Chris. What happened? A deer, Christopher said, his voice returning to that practiced, soothing lilt. I had to brake hard. You had a panic attack and fainted. You really scared me, Ken. I'm sorry, Kenneth murmured, leaning his head back into the seat. He felt like he was covered in slime. My head, it feels so heavy. I think I had a dream. Or a nightmare. Christopher's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. What kind of nightmare? Kenneth looked him directly in the eyes of his attempted murderer, and projected every ounce of feigned vulnerability he could muster. I dreamt that you left me. That I was all alone in the dark and I couldn't find you. The tension in Christopher's shoulders visibly melted. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh and leaned over to kiss Kenneth's cheek. Kenneth had to clench his fists beneath his thighs to keep from flinching. I'm never leaving you, Kenneth. I told you, we're destined to be together. The accident was just a bump in the road. A bump you created, Kenneth thought. As Christopher shifted the car back into drive and continued toward the resort, Kenneth turned his gaze toward the dark forest outside. His mind was racing, a sharp contrast to his limp, relaxed posture. He needed a phone. He needed a computer. He needed to know what had happened to Carter. The image of Carter, his real boyfriend, with his messy curls and the way he looked in a simple white t-shirt, burned in his mind like a lighthouse. Is he okay? Did he move on? Does he think I'm dead? Every mile they drove deeper into the mountains felt like another link in a chain, but Kenneth didn't panic this time. The static was gone. The headaches were replaced by a cold, crystalline rage. Christopher reached over and took Kenneth's hand, interlacing their fingers. Kenneth let him. He even squeezed back. I love you, Chris, Kenneth lied, the words tasting like ash. I know you do, Christopher replied, sounding more satisfied than a man had any right to be. And soon, this will all feel like a bad dream you've finally woken up from. Oh, I'm awake now, Kenneth thought, watching the odometer climb. And I'm going to make sure you never sleep soundly again. Chapter 5, Paper Trails and Ghost Calls. The resort was a masterpiece of isolation, cedar-planked walls, a roaring stone fireplace, and windows that looked out onto nothing but miles of jagged pines. To Christopher, it was a romantic sanctuary. To Kenneth, it was a high-end prison. On their second morning, Christopher went down to the lodge to secure exclusive spa bookings. Kenneth watched from the window until the tall, lean shadow of the man disappeared into the tree line. The moment the door clicked shut, Kenneth's feigned lethargy vanished. His movements became surgical. He didn't have much time. He started with Christopher's briefcase, tucked neatly under the mahogany desk. It was locked, but the code wasn't hard to guess. Christopher was a man of ritual. He used the date of Kenneth's accident, the day he saved him. 0-8-1-4, the latch clicked. Inside wasn't just work paperwork. There was a thick, manila envelope. Kenneth's breath hitched as he pulled out a stack of documents. At the top was a printed email, dated 18 months ago, addressed to Carter Vance. Carter, it is with a heavy heart that I inform you Kenneth didn't make it through the final surgery. His mother has requested a private service and asks for no further contact during this time of grieving. Kenneth felt a hot, acidic tear prick his eye. You monster, he hissed, his voice a ghost in the empty room. He looked further. There were copies of the evidence Christopher had shown him, the photos. In the briefcase lay the originals. In one, Kenneth was sitting at a cafe table, laughing at something off camera. In the version Christopher had shown him, Christopher was sitting across from him. In the original, a tan, muscular hand with a familiar silver ring was reaching across the table to hold Kenneth's. Carter's hand. Kenneth's hands shook as he reached for Christopher's emergency burner phone hidden in the velvet lining of the briefcase. He dialed a number he hadn't thought of in 2 years, one that was burned into his soul deeper than the trauma. The international ringing tone was a slow, agonizing torture. Ring. Ring. Hello. The voice was deeper than Kenneth remembered, weary and thick with an accent sharpened by time in London. But it was him. Carter, Kenneth whispered, his voice cracking. There was a deafening silence on the other end. This isn't funny. Who is this? It's Kenny, Kenneth sobbed, muffled his mouth with his hand to keep the sound from traveling. It's Kenny, and I'm alive, and he's here, Carter, Christopher is here. Kenny. Carter's voice broke into a jagged sob. How? They told me you were buried. I saw the papers. I'm in London, Listen to me, Kenneth hissed, his eyes darting to the door. He ran me off the road. He's been keeping me in a fake life. I'm at the Blackwood Ridge Resort. Carter, please, you have to help me, but you can't let him know. If he thinks I remember, I don't know what he'll do. I'm coming, Carter said, his voice suddenly hard as iron, the grief replaced by a terrifying protective rage. Don't hang up, tell me exactly where. A floorboard creaked outside the heavy oak door. Kenneth's heart nearly stopped. I have to go. I love you. He killed the call, wiped the history with trembling thumbs, and shoved the phone back into the briefcase, snapping the locks just as the door handle turned. Kenneth dove onto the bed, pulling a book over his lap just as Christopher entered, carrying 2 glasses of freshly pressed juice. You look pale, darling, Christopher said, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the room. He set the drinks down and walked over, pressing a cold palm to Kenneth's forehead. Your heart is racing. Did you have another flash? Kenneth looked up, his eyes wide and brimming with fake, watery fear. He leaned his head against Christopher's stomach, hiding his face. I just got lonely. I woke up and you weren't here, and I got scared I'd forgotten where I was again. Christopher's tension visibly drained. He began to stroke Kenneth's hair, a slow, possessive rhythm. I told you, Kenneth. You never have to worry about being alone again. I've made sure of that. Kenneth closed his eyes, pressing his face into Christopher's shirt to hide the snarl of disgust on his lips. Just a little longer, he told himself. Carter is coming for me. Chapter 6, The Final Pursuit. The air in the cabin had grown heavy, thick with the smell of brewing storm clouds and Christopher's suffocating attention. For 2 days, Kenneth had been a ghost in his own skin, playing the part of the doting, recovering lover. But the cracks were beginning to show. Christopher was no fool, he was a predator, and predators could sense when their prey had stopped trembling and started waiting. You're remarkably quiet today, Kenneth, Christopher said. He was standing by the window, a glass of red wine in his hand, watching the driveway. The sun was dipping below the pines, casting long, skeletal shadows across the floor. Just thinking about the future, Kenneth replied, keeping his voice light as he folded a sweater. About starting over. Starting over here. Christopher turned, his eyes glinting with a sharp, sudden hunger. Or somewhere else. Somewhere, further away. Kenneth's pulse spiked. Wherever you think is safest, Chris. Christopher set his glass down with a deliberate clink. He walked toward Kenneth, his steps slow and measured. I checked the history on the lodge's Wi-Fi router this morning, Kenneth. Someone accessed an international server. And my briefcase, the latch was a hair's breadth to the left of where I leave it. Kenneth's stomach dropped into a cold abyss. He didn't move. He didn't blink. I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe the maid. We don't have a maid, Kenneth. I told them not to disturb us. Christopher was inches away now. He reached out, his hand wrapping around Kenneth's throat, not squeezing, but resting there, a terrifying reminder of how easily he could end it. I gave you everything. I gave you a life. I gave you myself. And you're still looking for that ghost, aren't you? You're still looking for Carter. The mention of the name broke the dam. Kenneth wrenched himself away, stumbling back against the bed. He's not a ghost. You lied to him. You tried to kill me, Christopher. I remember the rain. I remember the headlights. Christopher's face didn't crumble into guilt, it hardened into something jagged and insane. I saved you from a mediocre life. Carter didn't deserve you. He didn't have the stomach to do what I did to keep you. He lunged. Kenneth dived to the side, grabbing a heavy glass carafe from the nightstand and swinging it. It shattered against Christopher's shoulder, but the man barely flinched. He tackled Kenneth, the weight of him slamming the air out of Kenneth's lungs. We're leaving, Christopher hissed, pinning Kenneth's wrists above his head. His eyes were wide, blown out with a manic fervor. I have a cabin further north. No one knows it exists. Not even your dead boyfriend. He dragged Kenneth toward the door, his grip like iron. Kenneth fought, kicking and scratching, his heels dragging against the hardwood. They reached the porch just as a pair of headlights cut through the gloom of the driveway, gravel spraying as a rental car roared toward the cabin. No. Christopher snarled, reaching into his jacket for something, a syringe, a weapon. Kenneth didn't wait to find out. The rental car hadn't even fully stopped before the door swung open. A man leapt out, his face pale and contorted with a mix of agony and fury. Kenny. Carter. Kenneth screamed, finding a burst of strength to elbow Christopher in the ribs. Christopher stumbled back, his face contorting. He lunged for Kenneth one last time, an expression of, if I can't have you, no one will, crossing his features. But Carter was faster. 2 years of grief and suppressed rage fueled a tackle that sent Christopher flying off the porch steps and into the dirt. The sounds of the struggle were raw, the dull thud of fists, the gasping breaths, and then, the sudden, shrill wail of police sirens echoing through the valley. Kenneth collapsed onto the porch, his body shaking uncontrollably. Within seconds, Carter was there, pulling him into his arms. The smell was different, no antiseptic, no artificial lemons. Carter smelled of rain, old leather, and home. I've got you, Carter sobbed into Kenneth's hair, holding him so tight it hurt. I've got you, Kenny. I'm never letting go again. Below them, the police were swarming. Christopher was being forced into the dirt, his face pressed into the gravel, still screaming Kenneth's name, a litany of obsession that the wind finally carried away. Chapter 7, A Horizon Without Shadows. The air in the small coastal town of Astoria didn't smell like lemons or antiseptic. It smelled of salt spray, wet cedar, and the earthy, honest scent of a coming tide. 6 months had passed since the night on the mountain. 6 months since the handcuffs had clicked shut around Christopher's wrists and the suffocating veil of a fabricated life had been shredded for good. Kenneth stood on the deck of their new cottage, his hands wrapped around a mug of steaming coffee. He watched the fog roll over the Pacific, thick and white, but it didn't scare him anymore. He knew what was hidden in this fog, just the sea, not a predator. You're doing it again, a warm voice murmured behind him. Kenneth felt a pair of strong arms slide around his waist. He leaned back into the solid, familiar chest of Carter. It was a weight he never tired of, the grounding presence of a man who actually knew his middle name, his childhood fears, and the way he liked his toast burnt at the edges. Just thinking, Kenneth said, tilting his head back to look at Carter. The silver ring Kenneth had seen in the original photos was back where it belonged, catching the morning light as Carter squeezed his hand. About him? A little, Kenneth admitted. The lawyer called yesterday. The sentencing is final. Life without parole. He's gone, Carter. Truly gone. Carter tucked his chin into the crook of Kenneth's neck, his breath warm against his skin. He never had you, Kenny. He had a doll he tried to break into the shape of you. But the real you? You were tucked away where he couldn't reach. Kenneth closed his eyes. He still had scars, physical ones from the accident and jagged, invisible ones from the months of gaslighting. Some nights, he woke up reaching for a phantom pulse of a headache, his mind momentarily convinced he was back in that minimalist apartment in the sky. But then he would feel the uneven rhythm of Carter's snoring or the weight of their dog, a rescued golden retriever named Barnaby, at the foot of the bed, and the world would snap back into focus. I remember the first time we met, Kenneth said suddenly, a clear, sharp memory bubbling up like spring water. It wasn't a library. It was a rainy bus stop. You offered me half your umbrella, and you ended up getting your entire left shoulder soaked just to keep my bag dry. Carter laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through Kenneth's spine. I was terrified to talk to you. I thought you were way out of my league. Christopher tried to tell you we met at a gala, didn't he? Among other lies, Kenneth sighed, turning around in Carter's arms to face him. He reached up, tracing the faint scar on Carter's lip from the scuffle at the cabin. He tried to rewrite our destiny. He almost succeeded. Almost, Carter whispered. But destiny isn't a script, Kenny. It's a choice. And you chose to find your way back. They stood there for a long time, watching the sun finally burn through the mist, turning the gray water into a sheet of dancing diamonds. There was still work to do, therapy sessions, legal loose ends, and the slow process of reclaiming the 2 years Kenneth had lost, but for the first time, time didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a gift. Kenneth took a sip of his coffee, the warmth spreading through him. He looked at the moving boxes still piled in the living room, waiting to be unpacked, and at the man holding him like he was the most precious thing in the world. That static was gone. The music was back. And this time, it was a song they were writing together. Let's go inside, Kenneth said, a genuine, effortless smile breaking across his face. I think it's time we finally unpack the rest of our life.